My daughter said she'd only let me see my grandkids if I apologized to her husband. So I wrote a letter. When she read it out loud, the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. If this story resonates with you, I'd appreciate if you'd consider subscribing to Hidden Truth Revenge. Now let me tell you how it happened. She called me on a Saturday in March. I was in the kitchen finishing my coffee. 7:58 in the morning, 2 minutes early. Emily is never early. I picked up, and she said, "Dad, we need to talk." Her voice was tight, forced, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. I'd heard that tone before, in the months since she'd married Mark. Each conversation came with more walls, more pauses, more of someone else's words. "I'm listening," I said. "Mark is really hurt by what you said. About his work, about his business." I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. "He feels you don't respect him. And he thinks you're trying to drive a wedge between us." 3 months earlier, I had asked a simple question. At a family dinner, Mark had just described a new business deal, something about logistics software. He'd used big words, vague phrases, strategic partnerships, revenue acceleration, quarterly projections that triple baseline. I'm a retired accountant. I spent 30 years reading people's numbers. And Mark's numbers didn't add up, so I asked gently, "What exactly does your company do?" That was it. One question. Mark's face went red. He said I was questioning his integrity. He said I was jealous of his success. He said I never believed in him. Emily took his side. She always took his side. Now, 3 months later, I hadn't seen my grandkids in 92 days. My grandson Leo's 7th birthday had come and gone. I mailed a card. I never heard if he got it. "I want to see the kids, Emily." "And you can. But Mark needs an apology first. A genuine apology. He needs to know you respect our family." I could hear Mark in every word, the phrasing, the demand. Genuine apology, like he'd rehearsed it with her. "An apology," I said. "Yes, a letter would be best. So he knows you mean it." I set down my coffee. I looked at the wall. There was a photo of Leo and his little sister Sophie. From 2 years ago, before Mark. They were both laughing, covered in mud from my backyard garden. "What if I don't?" Her voice cracked. "Then I can't have you around them. Mark says it's not healthy. The tension, the negativity, he says the kids feel it." I knew then. She wasn't just parroting his words. She was trapped. He controlled the phone. He controlled the money. He controlled who she saw and what she believed. "Okay," I said. "I'll write the letter." She sounded relieved. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you'd understand." I didn't understand, but I understood enough to know that arguing would do nothing. Pleading would make me look weak, and Mark wanted me weak. "I'll have it to you by next week," I said. "We love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart." She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment. Then I walked to my desk. I sat down. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I uncapped my pen. But this wasn't an apology. This was a reckoning. The next morning, I pulled out my laptop before I'd even had coffee. I'd agreed to write a letter, but I wasn't going to write it blind. Not after everything Linda had told me. Not after the way Emily's voice had sounded on the phone, hollow, scripted, like she was reading off a cue card Mark had written for her. I started simple, public records. I figured Mark's online presence would be carefully curated. Instagram photos of him at networking events. LinkedIn posts about closing deals, but public court records don't lie. The first hit came in less than 10 minutes. Mark Turner, case number 2020 CH04823, Chapter 7, Bankruptcy. Filed in Cook County, Illinois, 3 years ago. Total debt listed $120,000. Creditors included a bank, a credit card company, and a name I didn't recognize at first, Jake Morrison. I stared at the screen. $120,000. Mark had never mentioned bankruptcy. He'd never mentioned debt. He'd talk like he was building a billion-dollar company. Revenue acceleration, quarterly projections that tripled baseline. Words that sounded impressive if you didn't know what they really meant. I knew what they meant. I wrote it down. Date, amount, case number, evidence number 1. Then I searched for Jake Morrison. Took me about 20 minutes to find the connection. An old article from a local business blog. Logistics. Startup implodes as co-founders go to court. There was a photo. Mark and a younger man with a nervous smile. I looked closer. That was Jake. The article said the startup collapsed when one founder, Mark, was accused of misusing company funds. The other founder filed a lawsuit. The case was settled for $20,000. $20,000. Mark's half of the business losses. But that wasn't what caught my eye. What caught my eye was the note at the bottom of the article. Jake Morrison had personally lent Mark $15,000. Unpaid. That was 18 months ago. I sat back. Looked at my notes. Bankruptcy. Lawsuit. Personal loan. Debts everywhere. But there was more. There was always more. I found Emily's name next. Not through court records, but through a bank statement. I'd kept copies of old joint accounts from when Emily was in college. I knew her bank. I knew her habits. It took some digging. I'm not proud of how I got it, but I got it. A credit card statement addressed to Mark Turner at Emily's address. The balance was $8,000. The card was in Emily's name. I stopped breathing for a moment. He'd opened a card in her name. Ran up $8,000 of debt. She probably had no idea. Or maybe she did, but she was too scared to say anything. I printed the statement. Evidence number 2. Then I called Linda. I need a favor, I said. You know anyone who knows Mark's old partner? Jake Morrison? She was quiet for 10 seconds. I might. Why? I need to talk to him quietly. Mark doesn't know. When do you need it? Tomorrow. She sighed. I'll make some calls. Jake Morrison met me at a coffee shop 3 blocks from his office. He looked exactly like the article photo, nervous, tired, slightly desperate. He ordered a black coffee and didn't touch it. Mark talked about you, he said. Said you were a retired accountant who didn't know real business. I let that one sit. He say anything else about me? Just that you were old-fashioned, didn't understand growth. That kind of thing. So, I nodded. He owe you money, Jake. The look on his face told me everything. $15,000, he said. Loan, I gave him 2 years ago. My savings. He said he'd pay it back in 6 months. And? Jake laughed. Cold? He bought a car, traded in his old one. Then he said the business hit a rough patch. Then he stopped returning my calls. You sue him. Couldn't afford to. The lawsuit already cost me everything. He looked down. I lost my house, man, all because I trusted him. I pulled out my notebook, wrote down his name, the amount, the date. One other thing, I said, the credit card in his wife's name. Jake's eyes narrowed. Are you doing that again? Again? He did it to his ex. That's why she left him. 2 cards, both in her name, both maxed out. She ended up paying it all. I didn't say anything, just wrote it down. I shook his hand when we left. He looked relieved, like he'd finally told someone the truth. I drove home and spread everything across my kitchen table. Bankruptcy filing, lawsuit, Jake's loan, credit card statement, notes from the coffee shop. It wasn't complete yet, but it was enough. I sat back, looked at the pile. $120,000 in bankruptcy debt. $20,000 from a fraud lawsuit. $15,000 he owed Jake. $8,000 on a card in Emily's name. Total, $163,000 in debt he'd never mentioned. And I knew, deep in my accountant's bones, there was more. There was always more with people like Mark. I picked up my pen, looked at the blank sheet of paper. I had everything I needed. Now I just had to write the letter that would blow up his world. The letter took me 3 days to write. Not because I struggled with the words. I had too many words. The challenge was choosing which ones to leave out. A letter that reads like a grocery list won't change anyone's mind. It needed to sound like an apology. It needed to feel like a father finally admitting he was wrong. So I started with the one thing Emily wanted to hear. Dear Emily, I owe you an apology. I wrote that line first. Then I let it sit for an hour. The kitchen was quiet. Coffee went cold in my mug. I watched the words on the page and wondered if she would even finish reading before she called Mark to celebrate her victory. I kept writing. I apologize for questioning Mark's business. That was never my place. You're an adult. You chose him. I should have respected that choice. True enough, I never should have questioned it. I should have stayed silent, let Mark dig his own grave. But I was her father. I couldn't watch her walk off a cliff without saying something. The letter moved into a different rhythm after that. I listed 3 things Mark had told the family. His revenue acceleration plan, his quarterly projections, his meetings with investors in Chicago. I noted each one. Then I said, I looked into these claims. I found records that suggest they were not accurate. I kept it clinical, an accountant's report, not a father's rant. The bankruptcy came next. Chapter 7, Cook County, case number 2020 CH 04823. I included the date. I included the dollar amount. $120,000 in discharged debt. A piece of paper that erased all the money Mark had borrowed and never repaid. I wrote, "You may not know about this filing, but it exists. I have a copy." The lawsuit followed. Jake Morrison, $20,000 settlement. Plus interest, the personal loan, $15,000 from a man who lost his house trusting Mark. The credit card, $8,000 in Emily's name. A card she never authorized. I stopped typing. Looked at the words on the page. This was not an apology. This was an indictment dressed in polite sentences. I signed it anyway. Your loving father, David. I folded the letter, sealed the envelope, wrote her address in careful handwriting. Then I drove to the post office and dropped it in the blue box outside. The metal door clanged shut. The letter disappeared into the dark. I stood there for a long moment. Then I went home and waited. 3 days passed. Nothing. No angry call from Mark. No tearful message from Emily. Just silence. I checked my phone every hour, then every 15 minutes, then every 5. The weight gnawed at me. I had launched a missile and couldn't see where it landed. On the third night, I was washing dishes. The phone buzzed on the counter. I dried my hands and picked it up. Emily's name on the screen. I answered, "Hello?" She didn't speak. I heard breathing, a sniffle. Then her voice came through, broken, shaking. "Dad?" "I'm here, sweetheart." "I read your letter." I waited. I read it to Mark. Another pause. Longer this time. He was supposed to laugh. He was supposed to tell me, "You were wrong about everything." That's what he always does. He spins it. He charms his way out. But this time... She stopped. I heard a door slam in the background. A muffled shout. "Emily?" He got so angry, Dad. Her voice cracked. He grabbed the letter from my hands. He said you were trying to break us apart. He said I would regret reading it. He called me stupid for listening to you. I said nothing. I'd never seen him like that, she whispered. He threw the paper across the room. He yelled at me. He told me I had to choose, you or him. And what did you choose? She was quiet for 10 seconds. 15. I told him I needed space. He didn't take it well. Another sound in the background. Glass breaking. Emily, are you safe? I'm in the car. I'm driving. Where are you going? A long breath. Home, Dad. I'm coming home. She started crying. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. The kind that says everything you believed has crumbled. I gripped the phone and said, I'm here. I'll be here when you arrive. I know, she said, I know. I heard her turn the wheel. The engine hummed. Then she said something I will never forget. Dad, I need your help. He's not who I thought he was. I looked at the folder on my kitchen table. Bankruptcy filing, lawsuit, credit card statement. Jake's affidavit. It wasn't complete, but it was enough. I know, I said, and I have proof. The invitation came from Linda. My sister knew what was happening. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice flat in that way she gets when she's already planning something. Family dinner, she said, Sunday, my house. Everyone's coming. Everyone? Everyone. She didn't say Mark's name. She didn't have to. Linda had been watching for 3 years. She saw him at the wedding, shaking hands too long, smiling too wide. She told me later she knew the first time he called Emily sweetheart. She said it sounded like a word he practiced in the mirror. I said I'd be there. Emily was nervous the whole drive. She sat in my passenger seat, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. She'd been living with me for 2 weeks now. The grandkids were at a friend's house. We agreed they shouldn't see this. Dad, she said, he's going to try something. I know. He's been telling everyone I had a breakdown, that you're controlling me, that you made me leave. I nodded. That's exactly what he'd do. She looked at the folder on my lap. She hadn't seen everything yet. Just the letter. The rest I kept close. We pulled into Linda's driveway at 5 minutes past 6. Cars lined the street. Mark's SUV was there, parked right in front. I parked behind it and killed the engine. You ready? I asked. Emily took a breath. No, but let's go anyway. The house smelled like pot roast. Linda's kitchen was warm and loud. Aunts, uncles, cousins, plates on the counter, wine glasses filled. I saw Mark standing near the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand, talking to my cousin Paul. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who believed he'd already won. Then he saw me. His face changed, just a flicker. A tightening around the jaw. He set down his glass and walked toward us. Everyone went quiet. "David," he said, "I was hoping you'd have the decency to stay home." I said nothing. He turned to Emily. "Em, we need to talk. Alone." "No," she said. Her voice was steady. "No, we don't." Mark's eyes went cold. He looked around the room. The audience. He was performing. That's what he did best. "I just want to understand," he said, voice smooth and slow. "You abandoned our marriage because your father wrote you a letter. A letter where he calls me a liar, where he says I'm not good enough for his daughter." He turned to face me directly. "You've been trying to destroy my marriage from day one. You never trusted me. You never thought I was good enough. You're a bad father, and you always have been." The room was silent. Everyone watched me. I looked at Mark. He was still smiling. That practiced, condescending smile. He expected me to raise my voice. He expected me to defend myself. That's what people do when they're accused. They argue. They get loud. They look guilty. I reached down and opened my folder. "Mark," I said, "you filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 3 years ago. Cook County, Illinois. Case number 2020 CH04823. You discharged $120,000 in debt that your wife didn't know existed." His smile froze. "You were sued by Jake Morrison for misusing company funds. The settlement was $20,000. Jake lost his house because he trusted you." No one spoke. I pulled out the credit card statement. "You opened this card in Emily's name. $8,000. She didn't authorize it. You did the same thing to your first wife." I placed the papers on the coffee table. One by one, Jake Morrison gave me an affidavit. He was your business partner. He confirmed all of it. Mark's face was red now. The smile was gone. "You don't know anything about running a business," he said. "You're just a retired accountant who sits at home and—" I pressed play on my phone. His voice came through the speaker. Clear, angry. "If you leave me, I'll make sure you never see your kids again. I'll tell the court you're unstable. I'll destroy you." Emily's hand went to her mouth. The recording was from 3 months ago. Mark had called her while I was at her house. She didn't know. I was in the other room. She didn't know my phone was on. She knew now. "That's enough," Emily said. Mark stared at her. "You're going to believe him over me?" "I'm going to believe evidence," she said. "I'm filing for divorce." She looked at me, then at the room. "Everyone needs to know the truth," she said. "David didn't break up my marriage. Mark did. All David did was show me the receipts." Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at the faces around him. Aunt Carol, Cousin Paul, Linda. No one looked away. No one smiled. He grabbed his keys from the counter. "This isn't over," he said. He walked out. The door slammed. The silence that followed was loud. I picked up the papers, folded them, put them back in the folder. Emily was crying, but she was standing straight. Linda came over and put an arm around her. "He'll try again," I said. "He'll fight for the kids. He'll fight for the house." Emily wiped her face. "Let him try." I looked at the door where Mark had left. He was already in his SUV. I could see him on the phone. Spinning. Lying. I didn't care. "Mark stormed out," I said quietly. But I knew it wasn't over. The legal battle was just beginning. The lawyer's office smelled like old coffee and paper. I sat across from a woman named Cheryl Reeves. She specialized in high-conflict divorce cases. Emily sat next to me, her hands folded on the table. She hadn't slept well in weeks, but she was here. That counted for everything. Cheryl spread the evidence across her desk. Bankruptcy filing, lawsuit settlement, credit card statement. Jake Morrison's affidavit. She picked up the recording on my phone. Listened to 30 seconds of Mark's voice. "If you leave me, I'll make sure you never see your kids again." She set the phone down. "This is gold." "I know," I said. "The bankruptcy alone," she said. "He never disclosed it. That's fraud in a divorce proceeding. The credit card in her name without authorization. That's identity theft. Combine it with the threats on this recording, and we have a strong case for sole custody and a restraining order. Emily spoke. What about the house? It's in both your names, Cheryl said, but he hasn't been paying the mortgage. That's abandonment of marital responsibility. The court will favor you selling it or buying him out at a discount. I can't afford to buy him out, Emily said. You won't have to, Cheryl said. Given the financial abuse, a judge will order him to transfer his share or sell and give you the proceeds to cover the kids' expenses. I reached into my bag, pulled out a second folder. Inside were bank statements and a car title. Mark's car, a 2021 sedan he bought 6 months ago. Claimed he paid cash, but I'd found the loan papers in a drawer at Emily's house when she asked me to help clean out the office. The car had $12,000 in equity. Mark had told everyone he owned it free and clear. He didn't. The bank owned most of it. There's something else, I said. Mark has creditors he hasn't paid. Bankruptcy discharged $120,000 in debt 3 years ago. But he owes more. His friend Jake lent him $15,000. A lawsuit settled for $20,000. That's $35,000 he never paid. Cheryl nodded. If I notify those creditors that he has assets, a car with equity, a bank account with cash, they can file liens, garnish his wages, freeze his accounts. Do it, I said. Emily looked at me. Dad, is that legal? It's legal, I said. It's called creditor notification. He owes them money. They have a right to collect. She didn't argue. The next 2 weeks were a blur of court dates and phone calls. Cheryl filed the restraining order first. A judge reviewed the recording of Mark's threat and signed it the same day. Mark was ordered to stay 500 feet from Emily and the kids. He could only communicate through a court-monitored app. If he violated it, he'd be arrested. Then came the divorce hearing. Cheryl presented the evidence in an hour. The bankruptcy, the lawsuit, the credit card, the recording. The judge, a middle-aged woman who didn't smile, listened without interruption. Mr. Turner, she said at the end, did you disclose your bankruptcy to your spouse before marriage? Mark's lawyer whispered in his ear. Mark shook his head. Did you open a credit card in your wife's name without her consent? Another whisper. Another headshake. Do you deny making this recording? Cheryl played it again. Mark's voice filled the courtroom. If you leave me, I'll destroy you. The judge looked at Mark. I've heard enough. Temporary sole custody to the mother. Supervised visitation for the father. Temporary restraining order extended. When this goes to final trial, I'm recommending full custody and a settlement that reflects the financial abuse. Mark's face went pale. He tried to speak. His lawyer stopped him. Outside the courthouse, Emily leaned against a pillar. Her shoulders shook, but she wasn't crying. She was laughing. A short, hollow laugh. He thought he'd win, she said. He always thinks that, I said. What happens next? The creditors get notified, I said. His car gets a lien. His bank account gets frozen. He can't pay his lawyer. He can't fight. He'll settle. And if he doesn't... I looked at her. Then we take him to trial. And he loses everything. She didn't need to hear more. 3 days later, Mark's car was repossessed. I heard it from Linda. She'd seen him walking home from the bus stop. His lawyer had dropped him. The bank had frozen his account. 2 creditors had filed liens. He lost his job a week after that. His reputation was ruined. The story had gotten around. Business partners didn't want to work with a man who'd been exposed in court. Emily and the kids moved into my house that weekend. Leo asked if Grandpa could teach him how to fish. Sophie wanted pancakes. I made pancakes. And in the quiet moments, when I looked out the window and saw them playing in the backyard, I thought about Mark. How he'd sat in that courtroom, how his face had crumbled. How he'd thought he could win. He was left with nothing. But the real victory was yet to come. The trust fund wasn't something I planned. It was something I owed them. Emily had moved into the guest room with Sophie. Leo took the small bedroom next to mine. The house felt full again, the way it used to be before Mark. I'd walk past their rooms at night and hear Sophie humming, Leo snoring. Small sounds, but they were the only sounds that mattered. A week after they moved in, I sat down with my financial planner. His name was Derek. He'd handled my retirement accounts for 15 years. He knew my numbers better than I did. I told him I wanted to set up a trust for the kids. He asked how much. $200,000. My retirement savings. 30 years of sitting in a cubicle, auditing spreadsheets, saving a little every paycheck. Derek raised an eyebrow. You sure about that, David? I was sure. I want it structured so Mark can never touch it, I said. Not a penny. Not if Emily remarries. Not if something happens to her. The kids get it when they turn 25, and only then. Derek nodded. He'd seen the court filings. He knew who Mark was. We spent 3 hours going over documents. Trust agreements, beneficiary designations, successor trustees. I made Emily the trustee while the kids were minors. If something happened to me, Linda would take over. I wrote it all down in my careful accountant's handwriting. Every clause, every protection. Mark's name appeared nowhere. Not once. When Emily found out, she cried. We were sitting at the kitchen table. I'd just handed her the signed trust documents. She read through them silently, her finger tracing the lines. When she got to the part about the kids turning 25, she stopped. Dad, she said, this is everything you have. It's everything I saved, I said. It's yours anyway. I'm just making sure it goes where it's supposed to. She didn't say anything else. She just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. The legal stuff took 2 weeks to finalize. Derek filed the paperwork with the county. I signed my name on the last page and handed it back to him. Done. That afternoon, I walked into the backyard. Leo was chasing Sophie around the oak tree. Emily was sitting on the patio with a cup of coffee, watching them. She looked different, softer. The tension in her shoulders was gone. I sat down next to her. I called Cheryl today, she said. The divorce hearing is next month. She thinks we'll get full custody. Permanent. Good, I said. Mark tried to fight it. His lawyer said he wanted joint custody. She paused. Cheryl sent them the recording. They dropped the request the next day. I didn't say anything. I just watched Leo tackle Sophie gently, both of them laughing. He called me last night, Emily said quietly. From a blocked number. He said he was going to appeal. He said the judge was biased. And what did you say? I hung up. I nodded. That was the right answer. The sun was starting to set. Orange light spilled across the grass. Sophie climbed onto the swing set and asked Leo to push her. He rolled his eyes but did it anyway. Emily leaned back in her chair. I start a new job next week, she said. Full-time, a design agency in town. They said, I can work from home 3 days a week. Good, I said. It pays enough for an apartment. I found a place 2 blocks from here. A 2-bedroom. The kids can share a room until I save up for something bigger. I felt something in my chest loosen. She was rebuilding. On her own terms. Stay as long as you need, I said. There's no rush. She smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd seen in months. Leo came running over, sweaty and grinning. Grandpa, come play. I'm being a monster and Sophie is a princess. A princess with a sword, Sophie corrected, holding up a stick. I laughed. I stood up and walked onto the grass. The grass was cool under my feet. Leo growled and charged at me. I picked him up and spun him around, his laughter loud and bright in the quiet evening. Sophie poked me with her stick. You're the dragon now, Grandpa. I pretended to roar. They both screamed and ran away. Emily watched from the patio. I caught her eye for a second. She was crying again, but she was smiling. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere down the block. I thought about Mark, about what he had now. Nothing. A car with a lien, a reputation in shambles. A bank account that had been drained by creditors. And then I thought about Leo and Sophie, asleep in their beds. Safe, secure. I thought about the trust fund. $200,000 sitting in an account that would grow over the years. By the time Leo turned 25, it would be more. Enough for a down payment on a house, enough for college, enough for whatever they needed. And Mark couldn't touch it. Not with a court order, not with a threat, not with all the charm in the world. I sat there in the dark and let myself feel it. The quiet victory of it, the small, clean justice. I'd lost 3 months with them. I'd lost Leo's 7th birthday. I'd lost family dinners and Sunday afternoons and all the moments that Mark had stolen. But I'd gotten them back, and I'd made sure they couldn't be taken again. The last thing I remembered before I went inside was the sound of Sophie laughing earlier that evening. A sound Mark would never hear again. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. See you in the next one.